O God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable in your sight, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. I've been thinking about trees a lot lately. Back in September, I heard about the redwood trees in Big Basin Redwood State Park that survived the wildfires that raged throughout Northern California, some of them almost 2,000 years old. One conservationist commented that she was thrilled but not surprised at the good news because redwoods are equipped to withstand fires. Last month, John Vandeven reminded me that the Chinese elm that's growing in the small garden off our sanctuary has been there since he and Blythe first came to Pioneer in 1958. If you've seen it, you've noticed its almost horizontal trunk and curving branches that dip low and reach high. Our church has been through a lot in these past years and is still alive and still trying to survive. A lesson for all of us, John said. And last weekend, on my first ever trip to Big Bear, we tried to view California's champion lodgepole pine, the largest of its kind in the state, at 110 feet tall, over 6 feet wide, and 440 years old. Unfortunately, our minivan was not able to maneuver the deep ruts in the dirt road to the trailhead, but we saw other towering pines that have made it through the severe winters that come at high elevations. Trees are resilient. That word resilience is one I've heard often this year as we've made our way through the twists and turns of 2020. Articles in financial publications aim to help businesses stay resilient. Educators have shared tips for children and families to build resilience. The County of San Diego even has a chief resilience officer who helps the county respond to challenging situations like the COVID-19 pandemic. Members of our regathering committee have seen Gary Johnston on the regular briefings for faith leaders from the county. Generally, we think of resilience as toughness, the ability to withstand challenges and recover quickly from hardships, a capacity to keep on keeping on. Scientifically speaking, resilience refers to the ability of a material to be flexible. Resilient items can bend and stretch and still return to their original shape, like a rubber ball. They bounce back. But there are others who find a deeper meaning in this idea of resilience, something more than just surviving, but thriving. Andrea Seeloff, an instructor in the Resilient Leaders Project at the Seattle School of Theology and Psychology, puts it this way: resilience is a process of growth in the midst of adversity that results in long-term increased well-being. Through their programs and publications, including one in which I am currently enrolled, the Seattle School is supporting pastors and other faith leaders to support and strengthen their resilience as they seek to serve the church in times of great change and transition. 2020 has added even more dimensions to the challenges the churches were already facing. And the work of resilience for leaders and organizations is more vital now than ever. How might we thrive, not just survive, during this time? Of course, people of faith have endured adversity before. As we read our way through the story, the abridged version of the Bible, we've been reminded of the many dangers, toils, and snares through which God's people have already come. Slavery in Egypt, wandering through the wilderness, the conquest of the promised land, the costs of kingship. In this week's chapter, A Kingdom Torn in Two, we read about the divisions that split the Israelites along tribal lines, with Judah and Benjamin allied in the south and all the rest united in the north. Today's reading from Jeremiah fast forwards us a bit to a period after the destruction of the northern kingdom, when the southern kingdom of Judah faced a similar fate. As God's appointed prophet, Jeremiah warned the people that if they did not surrender to the Babylonians, they would lose their precious land and find themselves in exile. But the people resisted. Surely their military leaders would save them. The prophet Jeremiah, speaking to people facing profound adversity as the Babylonians closed in, gave them and gives us an image of resilience. Using the metaphor of a tree, Jeremiah paints a picture of the thriving, not just surviving, that becomes possible when we place our trust not in humans, but in God. Here's what he says: "Cursed are those who trust in mere mortals and make mere flesh their strength, whose hearts turn away from the Lord. They shall be like a shrub in the desert and shall not see when relief comes. They shall live in the parched places of the wilderness, in an uninhabited salt land. Blessed are those who trust in the Lord, whose trust is the Lord. They shall be like a tree planted by water, sending out its roots by the stream. It shall not fear when heat comes, and its leaves shall stay green. In the year of drought, it is not anxious, and it does not cease to bear fruit." In this year that has brought so many challenges our way, I keep coming back to these words from Jeremiah and the beautiful image of that tree. They remind us that living as God's people does not mean that we will be exempt from hardship. Heat and drought will come. We're in the midst of them now. A global pandemic that kills millions and disrupts every aspect of our lives. Racial injustice that rips at the fabric of our society. Political and ideological divisions that create chasms between us. There are times when it is more than we can bear. We get weary. Our spirits feel like parched places in the wilderness, and we are tempted to despair. I've felt that way, especially this week, looking at maps that divide our country into camps of red and blue, while numbers of COVID cases climb and we enter our 8th month of working and schooling and worshiping from home. I feel sometimes like I am living in an uninhabited salt land. Perhaps you feel that way sometimes too. But Jeremiah reminds us that when our trust is in God, when our trust is God, we are not like shrubs in the desert. We are trees planted by a stream, with roots that are able to tap into a source of life and strength that will sustain us no matter what circumstances we face. The love of God is that never-ending stream full of living water that grounds us and allows us to grow and even blossom through difficult times. Jeremiah's words weren't a Pollyanna platitude to cover the people's pain. They were meant to break through their doom scrolling and remind them that what is visible externally isn't all there is. Last year, the Reverend Dr. Margaret Bullitt Jonas an Episcopal priest in New England who also serves the UCC as missioner for creation care, shared a reflection on this passage from Jeremiah called Rooted and Rising, Spiritual Resilience. She reminds us that when we look at trees, we only see a part of the picture. Trunk, branches, leaves, and fruit are only possible because of what is going on underground in the roots. In books like The Hidden Life of Trees, we learn that the root systems of trees communicate with each other, and that trees develop social networks and share resources. And that's true for us too, Bullitt Jonas says. When we sink our own roots deep into the love of God, we too discover that everyone and everything is connected. On the surface, we may see only our differences, what divides us from each other. But from below, on the level of roots, we discover what Martin Luther King Jr. called the beloved community. Here, where God's love is always being poured into our hearts, we realize that everyone and the whole creation is loved and that we belong together. Beneath all our differences of race and class and gender and political party, we belong to one living, sacred whole. Every time we tap into the deep down truth of our essential belovedness, we discover fresh energy for life. And so up we rise like a mighty tree, offering our gifts to each other and to the world, our fruits and leaves, our time, talent, and treasure, a kind word, a healing gesture, our resolve to take part in the healing of the world. This is my prayer for us all in this time that so often feels like drought, that we would cultivate habits and practices of faith that help us sink our roots deep and drink in God's love. That we might sense our connectedness as our root systems connect with each other, and that we might feel fresh energy flowing through us as we face the challenges ahead. Normally, during our stewardship season, we look back on all that we've done together as a congregation, and we look ahead to our plans for the coming year. Obviously, things are so different this year, and we do not know what the year ahead will hold. But this we know. We know that God is with us. God's power and strength are streams of living water that nourish us from within. Sinking our roots deep, we drink of that living water and we find our resilience. We discover that we can thrive, not just survive, in these uncertain and unsettling times. As I stand now in this empty sanctuary and look out on the printed images of all your faces, I feel my own hope return. I give thanks for the ways that this community continues to root itself in the love of God and neighbor, and to offer its gifts to a hungry, thirsty world. May we continue to bear fruit in this season, like trees planted by God's living water. Amen.